Hello everyone, I'm Nikhilam Kulkarni, Product Marketing Engineer at Broadcom. The introduction of multi-vendor systems in the 5G networks have complicated the operations for communication service providers or CSPs. To manage a multi-vendor network, the CSPs will have to use multiple management tools which can be tedious and will also require a team with wide range of specialized skill set. Broadcom simplifies the network operations for CSPs in such scenarios using Workflow Hub. Workflow Hub is a low-code umbrella orchestrator that provides built-in workflows to automate the lifecycle management of the VMware Telco Cloud Platform, including virtual infrastructure, CAS infrastructure, and network functions, and support custom workflows to orchestrate the tasks of other management tools through REST APIs or third-party automation tools. Workflow Hub workflows follow the serverless workflow specification and relies on Open API standards. For REST APIs that are not Open API compliant, Workflow Hub allows the users to compose Open API schema for those corresponding APIs. In this demo, we will learn how to compose custom workflows in Workflow Hub and run them along with built-in workflows to implement a particular task. Let us consider a use case where we want to deploy a CAS cluster with Prometheus installed in it and then add its Prometheus endpoint as a data source in Grafana. Workflow Hub has built-in workflows to deploy a CAS workload cluster and install Prometheus in it. But to add that Prometheus endpoint as a data source in Grafana, we need to compose our own custom workflow. But before that, since Grafana APIs are not Open API compliant, we will also compose an Open API schema for it. The API call to add a Prometheus data source in Grafana includes the Grafana URL with the API endpoint, authorization, accept, and content type headers, and the body with name, type, and URL of the Prometheus endpoint. First, let's begin by composing the OpenAPI schema for this API call. OpenAPI schema starts off with the OpenAPI version, an info block which contains title, description, workflow version, terms and conditions, author details, and license. This kind of forms the basic introductory structure of the schema. That is followed by the servers block that will define whether it is a HTTP or a HTTPS call, the IP or FQDN, and port of the API server. Then we define the components block, which specifies the type of authentication scheme in the corresponding authorization header. In the paths block, the API endpoint is specified along with the associated details such as post, put, or delete operation, a unique ID and authentication scheme for the operation, a definition of extra headers, details of the request body with its schema, and the expected response codes along with its schema. Once it's composed, let's add the schema in Workflow Hub, log into VMware Telco Cloud Automation UI, and navigate to Schemas tab under Workflow Management subsection in Workflow Hub section. Click on Add Schema, enter the schema path, then select the type of schema to be Open API, and paste the schema in the appropriate text box. Then click Add. Now let's compose the workflow. As discussed before, Workflow Hub workflows follow the serverless workflow specification. The workflow starts off with an intro block that contains an ID, name, version, and description of the workflow, along with the version of the serverless workflow specification that is used to compose this workflow, and then the starting task or state of the workflow. Then we define the functions block, which basically defines some Open API endpoint or points to the Open API schema added in Workflow Hub. In our case, it refers to the schema we just added. We provide a name to that function and define the function type. It could be a REST API function or an expression function or something else. But in our case, it is a REST API function. Then we provide the schema path, which we had specified during the creation of the schema. And if there are any addendums to that configuration, we provide those as metadata. In the states block, We basically call the function we just defined and pass any arguments or variables required to run that function or make that API call. Now that we have composed our workflow, let's add it to Workflow Hub. Log into VMware Telco Cloud Automation UI and navigate to Workflows tab under Workflow Management subsection in Workflow Hub section. Click New Workflow, furnish a name for the workflow and click Create. Click on the Code button and paste the workflow in the code section. Then click Save. You have now created a workflow to add a data source to Grafana. Let's merge that with CAS workload creation and Prometheus add-on installation to create a master workflow so we can implement our entire use case in a single flow. Create a new workflow, furnish a name for this use case. Then in the canvas, drag and drop add Prometheus data source in Grafana workflow from Custom Workflows tab. Then click on Prebuilt tab, search for workload. Drag and drop create workload cluster and create workload cluster add-on workflows. Then search for node, drag and drop create node pool workflow. Connect create workload cluster workflow to create node pool workflow. Then connect the create node pool workflow to create workload cluster add-on workflow. And then in turn connect that to add Prometheus data source in Grafana workflow. Click on the Save button and then click on ellipsis and click Run. Paste the input to this master workflow and click Run. This kicks off all the sub-workflows in the master workflow in a linear fashion, being run one after the other. When all the sub-workflows are run successfully, the state of the master workflow is marked completed. Through this exercise, we have demonstrated the process of composing OpenAPI schemas for non-OpenAPI REST endpoints, composing custom workflows to automate operational tasks in the network, and highlighted the fact that these custom workflows can be combined with built-in workflows to orchestrate multiple use cases end-to-end using Workflow Hub. Hope you enjoyed the demo. Thank you.